Scotland had a very large involvement in chattel slavery in the West Indies. So if we're going to talk about the West Indian slavery, British West Indian slavery, and we're going to talk about Henry Dundas's involvement in that, then that puts it in the context of a part of Scottish history which is not very well known. Henry Dundas, who was he? He held many positions. He became Lord Advocate, and after becoming Lord Advocate, he became an MP. He became a very powerful minister in Pitt's government. He was in charge of the war, the Navy, Board of Trade. That means he controlled administration of the colonies. He also was Keeper of the Signet and was Home Secretary. So we have a man who, the statue is 150 feet up in the middle of Edinburgh, and a lot of people pass him every day and have no idea who he is or who he was or what he did. And when I first looked at that statue, there was a small plaque, which I think is still there, but it's away from the statue. And there was another plaque next to the statue, and that has since disappeared. And I think on the plaque next to the statue, I remember quite clearly, it described him as a powerful politician. That's the essence of what they said about him. However, it did include that he was impeached. Now, it didn't say for what, but Henry Dundas is the last British politician to be impeached in 1806. You know, he was a powerful politician. In 1792, Pitt, the Prime Minister, had advised Wilberforce to try and get the slave trade abolished. You know, Britain was transporting something like about 42,000 slaves a year from Africa to the West Indies. Wilberforce put forward a bill in 1792. Henry Dundas put down an amendment to that bill. So instead of what Wilberforce said, that slavery should be abolished immediately, Dundas said it should be abolished gradually. He was not going to allow the slave trade to be abolished. I've gone and checked what Pitt actually said. Pitt was the Prime Minister. Dundas was his friend. They worked very closely together. So if anybody should know what Dundas meant by gradual, it's Pitt. And in Pitt's speech, which one can go and check, of 1792, when they were debating gradual abolition and whether it should be voted on, Pitt actually said, and I'm just quoting roughly here, he just said it's, you know, what is gradual? He said it is refusing to act until 1,000 favorable circumstances unite. Now, that really means never, or as long as possible. So that is the man who we have Dundas Street named after. He's got a big statue in the middle of Edinburgh. He became a Viscount later on for his work. The point is that that was a significant part of Scottish and British history. In fact, his action caused about 630,000 slaves to be transported. But the powers that be don't want it to be told, then I regard that as shameful. The other point is that, okay, some people say, should we take the statue down? And I say no, because if you remove the evidence, you remove the deed. And therefore, I really feel that street names, statues, buildings should not be touched. The plaque should be attached, explaining the history. Now, many years ago, I looked at the compensation list, the slave compensation list, the list of everybody who received compensation for their slaves in 1833. The slaves were emancipated. You know, this is 800,000 British slaves, and they were property. And therefore, technically, if you're losing your property, you want compensation for it. The British Slave Code 1661 said a slave had no right to life. and that a slave was property. So to abolish slavery, you had to give people money for their properties. What I'm trying to do is to draw a comparison between the big slave owners, like the Gladstones, who came from Leith, and John Gladstone, who received, for his 2,508 slaves, he received in today's money about 83 million. We also have Rodney Street, just down, and that's one of the most famous streets in the country because it's named after Admiral Rodney, who defended Jamaica from being taken by the French in 1782. And if we walk along Albany Street, which is just across the road, you'll find there are houses on Albany Street which are on the compensation list. India Street, there is a house, at least one, which is on the compensation list. York Place. And this is it, that people really don't want to feel they belong to something so horrific. However, it's true, because they now accept that, yes, we were involved, then in fact we have some sort of responsibility. And I just feel that any person who feel that if you're going to accept Robert Burns as part of your history and Walter Scott, and you're going to accept all the various things of the past which make you what you are, well, this is the past, and it is part of what you are. A lot of people criticize or are so embarrassed that Robert Burns bought his ticket to go to Jamaica, was going to sail to Jamaica in 1786. Now, one of the most powerful lines describing slavery and its avarice is not the slave's lament. It's in a poem called Ode Sacred to the Memory of Mrs. Oswald of Auchencrew. And Richard Oswald was a friend of the Grants from Aberdeen area, Monymusk. And in the 1750s, the Grants got Richard Oswald to link up with Mary Ramsay. So the Grants got Richard Oswald to link up with Mary Ramsay, and the Grants and Oswald owned Barnes Island, from which they were buying and selling slaves. So Oswald marries Mary Ramsay, and their house is still in Auchencrew. And then Burns was turfed out of his lodging for her funeral in 1789. And he went away and wrote this poem. He knew about slave owners and the money they made and how it changed your lives and made you powerful. But the line which really matters to me is where he says, she had hands that took, but never gave. And I think that sums up this slavery. And thus, this must be taught. It is a history that somehow people have tried to moderate. A lot of Scottish people don't want to feel responsible for the past. It's important to understand the past because some people try to deny the present. And if you deny the present, you are also denying the future. And the fact is that if you try to say to people that our racism today, if we're trying to say to people our racism today is based on the past, and they'll say no, it isn't, without having any evidence, because they don't want to feel responsible.